Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast, a space for nurturing the ecosystem of business, body, and living. What would it be like if you gave your body a leadership role in your business and chose greater happiness every day? These are the conditions that create a healthy biome and a thriving business. I'm your host, Heather Nichols, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast. I'm with you today and wanting to talk about happiness, the pursuit of happiness. Such a big topic, such an interesting topic, and one that can go a lot of different places. Most people in the world would say that happiness is something that they desire to have. And the interesting thing is that most people in the world, well, maybe a lot of people, I don't know about most people, but a lot of people, if not most, probably don't actually feel all that happy. And that's just such a curious thing, that something that so many people say they desire is not a reality that most of them have. So what is going on there? And I've been having a lot of conversations and listening to a lot of different perspectives on this lately. I was just listening to a book last week called Ikigai, which is like, I don't even really know how to describe Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept. It's like the idea of having being fulfilled, just by being you and contributing to the world, and having that be part of your source of part of what fulfills you on a deep level. And it's a beautiful book, and there's a lot of different aspects to this book, but in part of it, he goes into interviewing these people on the island of Okinawa in Japan. And this is one of those blue zones, they call them, which is an area of the world where people tend to have the greatest longevity and health. Not just living a long time, but actually being healthy and being satisfied with their lives. And he interviews all these elderly Japanese people. And they're all saying, well, why, what's the secret of longevity? Well, have a garden, wake up in the morning, go outside, eat vegetables, spend time with your friends, like a lot of simple, beautiful things. And I think, in Western society, in the Western world, we have, there's such an absence of that in our lives, the connection to the earth, that sense of the beauty of and the simplicity of things, growing your food, spending time with friends. Like one of the people said, I play cards with my friends and I laugh a lot. I wave to everybody in the morning when they are on their way to school, all the children, these simple things that are just completely not a part of our culture in the United States, in Europe, in the Americas, and a lot of the Western world, wherever you may be. You may be in, Australia or in the Middle East. There's life has gotten busy and full. And the interesting thing is that it has done that really at the expense of happiness, coupled with the pursuit of happiness that takes you away from happiness. So it's a very, kind of messed up situation that we found ourselves in. It's like, work your butt off so that you can get somewhere, so that you can be happy, but you're not going to be happy in the meantime, but you're going to pursue being happy while not being happy. And you may probably find that if you get to where you're going, when you get to where you're going, you're still not going to be happy. Either that or you're going to be dead shortly thereafter because you've stressed yourself out so much. And so, if we look at kind of indigenous cultures and Eastern, some kind of more traditional Eastern ways of living, there's a lot more simplicity. there's a lot more kind of like depth of relaxation and peace and ease, and a sense of just really being, just having a simple life and being grateful for that, relishing in the beauty of digging in the garden and those types of things. And I'm going to throw kind of a like, so those are kind of like the ends of the spectrum. There's the pursuit of happiness, which takes you away from it, but you're always trying to get it, and life becomes more complicated. Or this like simplicity that I think for a lot of us may sound good in a moment, but it's not always, like, it's not really feasible, and maybe not totally desirable, like that simple of a life. And there are moments where I crave something like that. And there are moments where I also give myself something like that. And if anything was my life all the time, like if my life was like the same all the time, I wouldn't be that interested. Like I would be bored, And when there's too much of the same thing in my life, I do tend to get kind of bored. And so I know for me, I like to have a lot of diversity. And that is also one of those things that you can recognize about yourself, honor about yourself, and, make sure that you have enough diversity. And also, it's one of those things that you can really distract yourself in the pursuit of, again, trying to find something that you don't currently have. And anywhere that you're trying to find something that you don't currently have, it's a setup, it's like, because a lot of times we look for things that we don't currently have, thinking they're going to be the thing that gives us happiness. But then when we have that thing, when we achieve that goal or whatever, we've got the next goal, and it's like from there, the horizon always moves, as you move, the horizon always moves. So, and actually another really great book about that, I've read so many cool books lately in the past year, actually, or I mean my lifetime, but I've been doing a lot more reading this past year. Listening to books is really helpful for me, because I like to move my body when I when I read, so I listen and move. But there's a beautiful book by Dan Sullivan called "The Gap and the Gain," and this was my introduction to the strategic coach body of work, and I'm in the middle of a training with them right now. They have some really cool tools and conversations, and the gap and the gain is about basically this very thing of like having this thing on the horizon that you desire to have, and constantly constantly reaching for it. So you're always in the gap. You're always in the gap between where you are now and what you would like to have, rather than seeing the gain, seeing what you've accomplished, how you've accomplished it, like seeing what you have that you've been asking for. And one of the things we say in Access Consciousness is that a lot of times, like, nothing shows up like you think it's going to. So in order to be able to recognize what you've accomplished, what you've created, you have to look with a very open point of view, because you won't be able to see if it shows up, if it has shown up in your life, but it doesn't look exactly like you thought it would, you're not going to recognize it. And we miss so many things. We miss the opportunity to acknowledge so many things by being more in that gap, that sense of what I don't have, which takes you always out of happiness. Then this is what I do have, and this is what I have created, and this is what I have gained and achieved and accomplished, and having the gratitude for that. And gratitude is such a magical energy for the creation of greater. And so, with this, today's been such a cool day. I'm recording this at night, and my lighting is a little different. Getting my lighting good at night is a very tricky thing. I definitely have not mastered it yet, but that's okay. I'm not going for perfection here. So, but I've had some really beautiful conversations with some beautiful people today. And and just exploring this, so many different ways of exploring this conversation. And actually woke up to a Facebook post from somebody who was talking about how it's her 40th. She's entering a new decade. It's her 40th birthday, and how she like realized how unhappy she had been, and how it's kind of a new era, a new phase of life. And I was saying that I have this lotus tattoo on my foot that I got on my 40th birthday, and my 30s really were a pile of muck and mud. The lotus flower grows out of the muck, the swampy, muddy, underneath the lotus flower is this muddy, swampiness. And so I got this lotus on my foot because my 30s was really not very fun for me. And my 40s was so much greater, and my 50s has been so much greater. And it was interesting to look at that, because I went, in my 40, and it's so wild to think about this, but I was like on my 40th birthday, I got this lotus tattoo. My life had already changed a lot. I had gotten divorced. I was in a relationship with my partner that I still am with here 14 years later. But my kids have been, my kids have been born in my 30s, and they were little, and it was a very stressful time. And I was thinking, gosh, by the time I was 40, I'd had a lot of different moments of happiness in my life. And yet I was really like, the tattoo to me symbolized this, like, okay, now's the time that I'm going to get happy. Now's the time that I'm going to thrive and start to really enjoy my life. And how crazy that it was 40 years, before I really chose that. And again, I wasn't unhappy, but before I really went, I'm choosing to thrive, and I just looked at that and I was like, that's insane. Like 40 years, that could be half of somebody's life. It could be less, it could be more. 40 years, and it just kind of started my day on this note of like, well, what are we doing then? What are we doing? We're pursuing money, we're pursuing, fame, we're pursuing families, we're pursuing relationships, sex, beauty, business success, all these things. And I talk about all of these things in my podcasts and in my work. And to me, they are actually part of a thriving biome. And it's so easy to have the belief that those are the things that are going to give you the happiness, Now, if those areas of your life are stress, they're sources of stress for you, that is going to create stress in the biome. That is going to diminish the biome. And I realized I hadn't ever really talked about this sort of base, sense of happiness and joy, and like just as a choice, as something that is a choice, as something that we can just have for the choosing, where there's no outside anything required. There's no circumstances that we need to have in order to have that, and that's that kind of Eastern philosophy perspective, that ikigai, energy of like, I'm happy because I'm contributing to the world, and that's, my life is beautifully simple, and that's that, and it's like, it's not an either or. And so how do we kind of like navigate all of that? And another conversation I had with somebody today was a lady who was telling me, she said, gosh, sometimes I feel like I'm just working on myself just to like, based out of lack, based on like to get to the next level of growth, to get to the next whatever, to get out of something that, isn't working into something that's working better, And I think when this to me is like when I look at that, the choice at 40 years old to start to thrive, or even, I mean, for me, the past year has been a very challenging year, very interesting year, pivotal year, really important year. And I'm glad it's over. My year starts in, fall, in the end of the summer, August. I don't know. It's just been the past year. There's been so many amazing things. And also I've taken a lot of things apart. And because I realized actually, I last summer, I've told this story before, but last summer I traveled enormously. Like I traveled all over the world. Basically, I was barely home. I was home for, I don't know, 2 weeks, I think, the entire summer. And I love summer in Colorado, and I love where I live. The Rocky Mountains are literally right out my back door, and I didn't really get to enjoy it. And I had done all this traveling, and I came home and I was exhausted and stressed. And I was like, I just spent the summer traveling the world, which is, bucket list for a lot of people. And for me, it was like here I've achieved something in my business. I've traveled the world. I've been teaching these classes and, exploring different beautiful things and people. And yet I was just so exhausted from it. And, I made a lot of conclusions at that time that I had to, I've had to since kind of unwind and get rid of, and do something else, do something different than stick to those conclusions, because conclusions never get us anywhere. And it was an interesting part of the year that I've had this past year. But to look at this sense of like what this lady and I were talking about today of, just this constant pursuit of more, or constant pursuit of happiness or growth, from this point of view that there's always something wrong that needs to be changed. Or there's always something, even if you don't have the perspective that something is wrong that needs to be changed, which if you don't, please recognize how unique you are, because very few people have that. But more, even if you don't have that and you have more perspective of, I'd like to have more, so I'm going to go get it, there's an amazing thing about the pursuit of more, the desire for more. There's something really, really beautiful about that. And I've had to, in my own life, like access consciousness has been an incredible gift for me to not make that wrong, because I was always made wrong for how much more I desired, and I think a lot of us have had that experience growing up as kids. Like, can't you just be grateful for what you have, kind of a thing. And so there's this hunger that a lot of seekers have, that it's not really satiable. And what if it doesn't have to be satiable? And what if the insatiability of you is the greatness of you? And what if also there's deep satisfaction, happiness, joy, relaxation, peace, ease, enjoying your life, having fun in the pursuit of more, the choice for more, the choice for happiness, and the acknowledgement that maybe you'll be satisfied, but you'll never be done creating. You'll never be done creating, and if you function from polarized thinking, then it's hard to reconcile all of that, because it just seems like you kind of have to like pick a side. I'm either going to just like keep pursuing more and never be happy, or do the simple life. And, what else is possible beyond all of that? And so this is where I want to really just propose that happiness could just simply be a choice. And that was actually the very first class I took in Access Consciousness many years ago. Well, not the first one, but it was in the beginning. I don't know, 2012 or 11 or something like that. It was called Happiness is Just a Choice. And I remember being at this class. I was in an evening introduction, and in this room full of people I hadn't ever met before. And hardly anybody in the room really got it, because how could happiness just be a choice? How could it just be a choice? Well, if you're going to just live in an island in Japan in the blue zone and eat sweet potatoes and grow your garden and wave to the children, then okay, yeah. But if you desire more or your life is different, then what are you going to do? People become monks, people do all these things. And so I remember being in this room full of people that were not really getting what was being said in this class. And I remember just going, I'd like to have that notion that happiness is simply a choice. It's just something that I could choose. And it's not circumstantial. It's not based on what's happening with my children, what's happening with my money flows, my business, my body, my relationships, my family, blah, 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 blah. My to-do list, it doesn't have anything to do with that. And I can choose happiness. I can choose simplicity. I can choose the to-do list. I can choose dynamic creation. I can choose all of it. And it's sort of like, happiness is still just a choice no matter what. So how do you step into that? How do you kind of accomplish that as one of the primary ways of being, And as I've been exploring all these different conversations, books, watching different people, videos and whatever in this past year, really broadening my scope of like what I expose myself to. I've seen people get up on the stage or get up on their videos or their whatever they're doing, emails, all that stuff. I got to take a drink of water. I've seen people take, the stage on their platform, whatever it may be, and talk about, all these different things about, well, you have to just like chill out and you have to have there's like the feminine business thing. And then there's like, even the strategic coach, like there's this whole time management system. If you just organize your time this way, and none of it's wrong. None of it's right. It's just different things work for different people. But there's still within all of that, this sense of like, you got to just, get your ducks in a row, and then you can relax into your life and you can have this happiness, And it's like, okay, so what if you don't have to wait till your ducks are in a row? You're 40, you're 50, you're 60, you're 70. Oh my gosh, you're getting close to the end of your life. Are you happy yet? What if you don't have to wait for any of that? What if you can choose joy right now? Now, you may have life circumstances that are very stressful. I know a lot of people who have a lot of shit going on in their lives, bodies, finances, businesses, etc. right now. And it can be a little or a lot more challenging to find the joy in those, when those things are going on. Now, if you commit to this reality, cultivating it, because this is something you have to cultivate. It's not just something I can like, here's 3 steps, go do it, you're done. It's a choice you have to cultivate every day for happiness to be your ground, the place where you live, the place that you spring forth from, the place that you create from, and the place where you when you lay your head at night down on your pillow, you're still there, and when you wake up in the morning, all that stuff. There's a commitment, a prioritization of it. And this is a massive topic. There's so many different aspects that I could talk about here with this, and I couldn't possibly go into all of it in one podcast. But when that becomes your priority, so here's a couple things. So when you prioritize, okay, you know what? Forget all this stuff, all the things, the simplification, the complexities, the goals. Forget it all. I'm going to choose to have a joyful life. By the way, the earth gets really happy when we get happy. Like, our joy can be one of the greatest gifts that we can be and give to the earth and to each other and to our bodies. And it's one of the most creative elements, and money follows happiness. And I mean, there's so many different pieces to this. But when you prioritize happiness, which is kind of, I would say, what I did a year ago, I was like, okay, I am prioritizing happiness. Now, for me, I went through a whole bunch of things this past year that I had actually a lot fewer moments of happiness in this past year, getting to, there was some stuff that had to change. There were some things that started moving as soon as I made that my priority. And a lot of times, there's just a lot of shifting around that needs to happen as we explore and move in our lives. And you're not going to have an immediate result, okay, happiness is going to be my fertile ground, my choice, I will be the source for my own joy and happiness. Okay, cool. So, but there was a lot of things kind of in the way for me that didn't allow me to have that as a readily available choice. And it was way more energetic stuff going on in my own world that kept me from being. And this is where the being thing comes in, the being conversation, because when you have greater access to your being, you as an infinite being, not who you think you are, not your monkey mind, not your body, not your personality, not your identity, but you as a being. And there's a whole exploration you can do around that is just incredible and beautiful and so fruitful. When you start to really get more connected to your being, then you have a much greater, happiness it's just your being. It just is happy, that's just who we are as beings without our minds. And there's also a deeper sense with ease of what's true for you. And we do a lot of mental gymnastics, and even with the tools, whatever tools you may have, and access consciousness being some of the main ones that I use, we've talked lately about this whole thing of, is this my personality or is this my being? I've talked about this in previous podcasts. Is this my personality or is this my being? And even when you start to ask that question, a lot of times you're going to think something is your being, and it's still your personality, your mind talking to you. It's pretty tricky. Your personality and your mind is pretty tricky. When you get to being, and there's more and more and more and more being we get to all the time. When you get to being, it's ease. You know what you want to choose. You do not second guess yourself. There's no mental masturbation. There's no I need, I don't need, I blah, blah. There's no computation. There's no trying to run after stuff. There's no, I need to simplify, even that is a conclusion. I need to pull back. I need to hold back. I can't do this. I should do this, None of that is being. None of that is your being. Your being is, yeah, let's do it. Let's play, And our being is way more the yes person, when it comes to things that are going to create a greater future for us. And there's so many of those beautiful, beautiful things available out there. And so that's just one way to start to look at, like, is this my personality or is this my being? When you're being, it's like you're just being a tree. And the tree's like, yeah, okay, bring me some sunshine, bring me some soil. I'll have some water. I'll have some drought. It's all good. You know, there's a real sense of peace and ease and a knowing, deeper knowing of who you are. And from there, those things that you would like to have in your life, and it may be, hey, I would actually like to have more simplicity, or hey, I would like to actually create a lot more, you know, and there's going to be different things at different times as well. But when you have more access to your being, then all of that becomes so much more clear. And I'm, you know, I talk to a lot of people, I interact with a lot of people. I'm like, and I facilitate classes and I also host classes for access consciousness. And so I'm always like in touch with people that are, signed up for a class, or maybe they're going to come, or maybe they're not. And I can always perceive this kind of like like, not like, sometimes it's waffling, sometimes it's whatever, just like thinking or debating or computing or weighing, or, and it's so interesting that, because when you're being that, it's that none of that is there. It's just, there's just a real clear sense of like, yep, no, yeah, no, yeah. And you don't have to torture yourself about any choices. And that is this, it's like you have the joy already. You have the happiness as a choice, as a fertile ground. It's there. It's part of who you be. And then you just add to it, or you don't, but you don't have to torture yourself about anything. You also don't have to be like constantly running after stuff, or deciding that you need to like structure things this way or simplify. It's like there's so much spontaneity, playfulness, relaxation, space, happiness, joy, when you have more access to your being. And from there, anything that you desire to create, it's just a fun thing that you add to your life. I felt like this past year, I sort of, it was almost like now looking back on it, I didn't realize this was really going on. And this is just so interesting because I've also seen a lot of people over the many years of doing this type of work, decades of doing this type of work, personal growth, whatever you want to call it. I've seen so many people, kind of destroy their lives, diminish their lives, all these interesting choices that people make. And a lot of times it's with this kind of like reason and justification of, oh, I'm growing and I'm growing in this direction. And then, they're actually really destroying their lives. And I feel like I've kind of did that a little bit in the past year. The good news is I'm on the other side now, different space. But when, like, yeah, so when you do have access to you, the being, not you, all those personalities, but you, the being, then knowing kind of like how you want to proceed and where and what and all that, it's just like, it flows. Things just flow, and things are very generative. And sometimes there's a period of, kind of having to take some stuff apart, which is what I felt like I did in the past year. It was like some disassembly required of my personalities. And I had some other beings in the mix. And I mean, there's so many different things I could say. Stuff I did with my body, stuff I did with my business, my relationship. Like, I really looked at every area of my life and started to get even more clear on what's true for me and choose that no matter what. And again, this is such a massive topic, right? So I keep finding myself going, oh, that's a whole, other podcast or like 3-day class I could do on, how to choose what's true for you, and I would say really in a lot of ways, the Access Consciousness Foundation is a great one for that. It gives you a much greater sense of you and what you can choose, that is true for you. without all the mental masturbation and mind chatter and all of that. But I guess I'm not really sure where I was going at this point. Kind of rambling, but because again, this is just, such a big topic. But the point is that the choice for happiness, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of happiness stops being a pursuit of happiness. It starts being an acknowledgement that you already have it and you already are it and you can already choose it. When you start to be, and you give yourself this broad, incredible menu of choices. And when you do that, you can choose anything. You can choose the simplicity, the, digging in the dirt. You can choose highly complex business transactions or business creations. You can choose a million different creations at once. You can choose to, parent in a way that is very triggering for you, but it's the best way to go about it and it's going to change everything for your kid. I've had to make that choice many times and it always yields like so much greater pretty quickly. There's just so many things that you can choose. You don't have points of view about any of it. None of it has to match the personalities that you've decided are true. None of it has to match that because you're now functioning from happiness is my priority. I'm willing to choose anything, do anything, be anything. I'm willing to create anything. I could have a million things going on. That doesn't mean that I've bought that those things, once they show up, are the source of my happiness and I can't be happy until they do. It just means that it would be really fun for me to create those things, and then whatever you choose can increase your happiness. It can increase your joy from the space of knowing that you already have it and you're just adding to it. And that is one of the greatest questions is what can I add to my life that would fill in the blank, create more joy right away, create more money right away, create more ease with my body right away. Ask that question and things will start to show up in your world. And as they do, if they match the energy of what you've been asking for, go do it. Function as a being who is joyful, who knows you can create anything and choose those things that show up that match what you've been asking for. Don't think about them. When you start to think, you start to go into computation, you start to go into your personalities, you start to reason and justify, you start to do all these weird things where you're sort of like, instead of like, yeah, you are not functioning from being, and the choice for happiness is going to be much more challenging in those moments because you don't believe that you can just choose it. It is just something I can choose right now. And as I said, it's not always that easy or simple. Sometimes there's stuff you've got to let go of and work through. Like I had this huge release in a lot of ways a few days ago that just changed my whole life. Like it really did change my whole life. It was one conversation, some access consciousness clearings, and everything was completely different after that. My whole life was changed. I felt more me than I've felt maybe ever. And I could see all of a sudden with all this stuff out of the way, I could see, whoa, this is what's true for me with my business, with, my child, with my body. And literally within a few days, my body changed. My relationship with my son changed. My business changed. My relationship with my partner changed. I started having way more fun. And I just got to me more. That's all you got to do, really. And then whatever you do from there, great. So I hope this was a contribution to you. There's just so many classes that I could highly recommend because this is an exploration that just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, not because there's something lacking, not because there's something missing, not because something has to be corrected or changed or whatever, But because you're a creative being who might just desire more, and if you're a creative being who desires more, it's fun to be in these conversations. And for me, I've taken, way more classes and workshops and stuff like that than I could possibly count. And every single one of them has made my life greater and contributed to everything that I'm creating. And I realized also in this past year that I started to kind of like slow down on how fast I was willing to choose things. And that wasn't me. Like, that just wasn't me. When I know something's for me, I'm like, I'm in. Is there money involved? Okay, if there's money involved, well, I'll figure it out. And I always do. And that's a very different way of functioning, but it's way more of what's true for me. And when I function from that, things work. My life works. It's just, and I just get to enjoy it, and that's what we're here for. So really, to circle back to the beginning, what I really want to invite you to is choosing happiness right now. What are you waiting for? It's not going to be easier to choose in 5 years, 10 years. It's not going to be easier to have when you have more money, or you have more sex, or you have a better body, or whatever. It's not going to be easier to have. It can, more ease in our lives can contribute to happiness, growing. But if you don't have it to begin with, you're not going to get it from those things. And that might be the most important sentence that I said in this whole podcast. So you can just fast forward to minute 41 and get the secret of life, the secret of happiness. So anyway, I hope that was a contribution. I've got all kinds of amazing stuff coming up. Depending on when you see this, you can look at my website, heathernichols.com. Also want to recommend, any Access Consciousness class. Dr. Dane here does a Being You Changing the World class, which is really incredible. That's one of the being classes that has created enormous freedom for me. And depending on when you see this, he's also going to be doing I think it's a 10 or 11 day thing called Restoring Hope. I am so excited for this program. It's $22, which is crazy, ridiculously inexpensive for something that Dane does. And he's one of the founders, or one of the creators of Access Consciousness. And it's 11 days in a row, like a Zoom call with him every day. And he's done these programs in the past, and they're just so phenomenal, really, truly world changing. And I think it's really time to restore hope. And the subtitle is something fun, like, creating your life instead of the shit show of this reality, or I don't remember what it is. It's great. We'll put it in a link down in the show notes. So that's available. And if you see this later on, I'm sure it'll be available in his shop as well. So let's have fun, guys. Let's be happy. Let's create a different world. Let's be and have the joy of being, and the joy of choosing, and the joy of being alive and having our bodies and living and knowing that we can create anything, because we can, especially when we're enjoying the process of creation. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for you. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me for the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. For more resources, check out my website at heathernichols.com and my social media channels as well. Have a beautiful day, and remember that your business thrives when you do.